Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, everyone.
Good morning.
All right, we're going to jump in. Today's topic is going to be around how to best use your workspace roles, all the roles that go along with a workspace today, inside the context of Fabric. So we have pipelines, we've got other artifacts, we've got other data engineering things. So that is going to be our main topic for today. Lots of, I think, debatable points around this one. I think we're going to have some good topic. Tommy was already trying to debate us before the show even started. So there's going to be some good stuff there. Alrighty. Before we do that, let's jump into a couple announcements and things that are coming across that we have found interesting across the webs. I think our first major thing we need to talk about here is October Desktop is here. It's out. You can download it. There's a whole bunch of new features in the blog. Gentlemen, anything that you found that stuck out to you? What did you like from the most recent blog month?
There's a glaring one, Mike, that has to be a continued conversation on this podcast that we've avoided more than I would have liked. And that's the need for composite models. They've continued. One, it's generally available and it's been at GA for quite a while.
Yep.
One of the big items in the October blog was the ability, if I'm adding multiple data sets together, how do I want to name the alias, or how do I want to name the other model coming in if two tables have the same name, like sales and sales? So not only does this tell me how much of are they thinking about composite models, but they are widely used. And these are obviously request features people have been saying, hey, we need to compensate for this.
Is it, or is this table stakes? Or is this is like basic features that they were missing? Like, I'm not sure, like, if you're really going to get people to adopt, I think I disagree with your comment that it's widely being used. I don't think it's being widely used. And actually, I find whenever I talk to people about composite models, I tell them use with extreme caution, because there's massive text strings that need to move between models and do filtering and things. So I don't use composite models, nor do I build it. I haven't really encountered any clients that I use that use composite models. What are you finding there, Tommy?
I'm finding a lot with the needs for, especially in self-service scenarios where you already have an enterprise model, or you already have but I need to add an additional table or source to it. I'm hearing more and more of this being a common need. And that's exactly the point of a composite model. Okay. I'm not seeing so much the need where I have two enterprise data sets and I need to merge them together.
Got it.
But the fact that it's GA, the fact that I can choose which tables I want from each model, and I don't have to have the whole kabang. I can just say these four table kabang.
Oh, that's kebab.
Kebab. We'll say kebab. The whole kebab.
I don't have to have the whole.
You can't go wrong with that.
I know.
Yeah, I don't have to have the whole cannoli.
I'm going to start using that.
There
actually.
You go.
I don't need the whole cannoli.
Yeah, you do need the whole cannoli. That's the problem.
I can't actually use that because I always do. But but the fact I can choose the tables, I'm like, from this enterprise model, I can choose the fact table and these two dimension tables. From this other one, I can use all the dimension tables. And this is all GA from by Microsoft. How is that not a need? And we can say that, but
yeah, I mean, I could see it being a need. I don't see it as a strong of a feature as some of the other things that maybe were released last month. So, Seth, anything that stood out to you? Any features that have you downloaded desktop, played with it a little bit? Anything that you stuck out to you?
I think the one at the top is interesting, where the capabilities of OneDrive to SharePoint integration are on by default now.
That's the one I was thinking more
like. The use case presented is an interesting one that I'd love to get your feedback on, because it's basically, the bullet points underneath are, hey, this is great because Power BI authors can now collaborate and I guess validate a report prior to publishing to the service. Do you guys find that a valid use case?
I don't think so.
Because I want to look at the model, not the nice, pretty layout.
Yeah, I don't think that's a valid use case. I mean, I would want to look at the model or the report and say, is this the right report? Should I be publishing this? Maybe. But there's no automatic method to get from the report in SharePoint to PowerBI.com in an easy way. You still have to download it and publish it from desktop. So what's the point? Like, I'm going to open it anyways. So maybe it saves me like a couple. Maybe it saves me like a minute of like not having to download it first, so I know which one I'm looking at before I go. It just seems
Maybe it's a ease of use UI UX validation.
Maybe
That has to be it. Did you get the pop-up yet?
for a pro user, that would make sense. For a premium user, that does not make sense. Because in premium, you get your own deployment pipeline. So anything premium, I don't think this makes sense at all.
Well, not even deployment
why wouldn't you
pipeline,
just?
but
Oh,
like a process that you follow to push a report into a validation, whether that's its own
Yeah.
QA environment or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's also use cases where if I'm sharing an app, I already have that staging environment in the workspace. Right.
Yeah, exactly. The workspace is the staging environment. So I don't really get it. So I still think someone's trying to make us use case for this one to say, oh, this is a feature we can do. This is really cool. And then we're just trying to make up a use case.
Yeah. Well,
there's
I
a-
mean,
there-
that was an interesting part to me. But okay,
There's a
glad
new
I'm not
pop-up
alone.
if you're saving to SharePoint before you get to publish. If you say, I want to publish to a workspace,
Yep.
you get to say, hey, we're going to publish or basically upload to SharePoint first. You're like, but that's on my computer. So there's that weird.
Oh, interesting.
So
I
it
didn't see
has
that.
it has this weird idea where like you're not syncing that SharePoint library, which you already should be if you have a good workflow
Yep.
on your computer, and it's going to actually just upload it to it. And again, it's really trying to copy or replicate the same way you would work on a PowerPoint file or a Word document
Mhm.
if it's coming from someone's shared like a shared folder. So not assuming that you already have that on your computer. That's where it makes the most sense. But
Well, I mean, I'm surprised, Tommy, you didn't mention all the features that you love as all the new on object updates.
my
that you would-
jam.
I've always been wanting. This is the feature that I've really been needing. Is I need a new placeholder for text in the editing phase. So what I did notice is you can now change the total when it says total at the bottom left hand corner of the table. The table now lets you change the total name, and now you can change the title. And when you hover or you click on the visual, the title shows up and shifts everything around in the visual. So the visual now gets this. Here's a placeholder that appears at random times and adjust your view of the visual. I'm like, I don't really know. I don't like this.
Give the people what they want.
I don't know who's wanting this, but it's being given to you. I still, I'm not a.
Maybe
I still feel like it needs some refinement. I'm not there yet. I'm not there
calculation
yet.
groups in the desktop now. So yeah, but we talked about it on Tuesday.
Yeah,
I did talk about that one on Tuesday. I did see a really funny meme on Twitter the other day. There is a new feature that I really like is inside the deployment pipelines, you can now have n number of deployment pipelines. So before you had dev, test, prod, they've now just enhanced that so you can have any number of deployment pipeline pieces, which I thought was awesome. You can now have 4 dev, test, QA, prod, whatever the heck you want to call it now. And someone on Twitter said, now I have enough of environments to match what I want to do. They had like 10 of them, and they're like, the environment is enough done before I have to go home for work on a weekend. The enough done to, like, it was. I got to pull it up. It was really funny. All the different. I think it was. I feel like it was like a. Oh gosh, I'll have to pull it up on my Twitter feed here. I thought it was absolutely hilarious, and I thought it was very comical.
I think that's probably the most either underrated or regardless the most valued part of the October update to me from a Power BI point of view. I hear a lot of needs like, why do I need 3? I only need 2. I need a dev and a prod for smaller teams.
Yeah. I mean, I do think dev prod works.
Prod.
Yeah.
Yes. I can't overestimate like how valuable that thing is. I mean, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Oh man, I can't find the note today. Where did it go?
Yeah.
Anyways,
how do you like the new home? The Power BI home and desktop?
I'm a little undecided yet. I'm gonna reserve. I think I like it. It's wearing on me a little bit, but it's definitely very different than what I'm used to. So we'll see. I'll hang out with it. I'll see what happens. What are you guys thinking about that?
Undecided.
You like it, Tommy? You like it?
I think it's fine.
Yeah. It didn't push me. It doesn't push me one way or the other a lot.
Yeah, I'm not disgusted by it, but I'm not
disgusted by it. I don't hate it and I don't love it.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I don't Yes, it's okay. However, let me double check here, another feature here. What I did find that I like is there is now a direct button for settings, which was way needed. So in the bottom right-hand corner, buried very, very far away in the corner on the right-hand side of your report, there's now a little tiny gear. And when you click on the gear, all of the settings panel opens up. And the amount of times I had to go in classes or teaching people, all right, go to the file, go to the options, click on options and set. It was like 5 clicks just to get to the menu where the settings lived. So now there's a single button press to get to all the options. I like that a lot. And I think that was probably been out for a while. And but that's, to me, that's a much better feature than some of these other UI interactive things that's going on here.
A significant update. So now instead of 7 clicks to get to report level settings, it's now 6.
Yes. Yes. Anyways, good stuff. Any other announcements or things that we should talk about before we jump in the main topic? All right. We're getting the blank stares. Let's move on to the next topic. So let's talk about, so main topic today. I think this is going to create a lot of conversation. I think I like this, where this is going to go already. How do you manage the roles inside your workspace? Now we have workspaces today. There's 4 roles only: admin, member, contributor, viewer. And I always get confused between contributor and member. I always get them flipped around. Member has more privileges than a contributor, which kind of feels weird to me. I don't know, for whatever reason. And then you have the viewer role on the very low end there. So now that we're adding all these extra and new artifacts, the lakehouse, the pipelines, these notebooks, a whole bunch of other things that are coming along with this. And there's actually some really good documentation that Microsoft has produced to kind of give us more of a picture around, here's what you can do with these new various artifacts. And when someone has access to the workspace, what can they do with that workspace? All right. This is going to be interesting. What is your impression on this, Tommy? I think you've got maybe some different opinions than what I've got around how these workspaces should work. And the workspace is a control mechanism to figure out who has build or edit access to pipelines, reports, data sets, and things. And let me frame up something here really quick. For clarity, when Microsoft recommends, hey, you're going to build a data set and a report, if you don't want people touching the data set and you need that to be separate from what's happening inside the workspace, Microsoft's guidance is build a pipeline or build a workspace for only reports. Thinly connect them or live connect them to a data set that's in a different workspace. So the control surface area, or the controls around who can edit and modify that data set, those now live or reside within the workspace. This is the tricky part. The permissions on the data set are independent of the workspace. So I can use the data set in a workspace that I don't have access to, which I think confuses a lot of people. All right. Introduce Fabric and add to the confusion.
I think, honestly, before that, let's understand roles as we know them today.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Before we get to Fabric.
Sorry.
In a traditional Power BI workspace, if you had just your data sets reports, the 4 roles, and there's always been the blurry line between admin and member, the top levels. Admin can add other members, delete the workspace.
Yes.
A member can, and obviously an admin can do literally everything else in a workspace: publish, update, delete,
add other admins like that.
A member can do everything but add other admins or delete the workspace, but they have the same capabilities as an admin, except they can't add an admin.
Yes.
So really from there are not a lot of distinct differences. It's basically an admin without the deleting the workspace privileges. The contributor can't just add people, but they can still update, publish, etc. They have all the capabilities to work in the workspace, no limitations. They can publish an app. And then you have the viewer. So I think we're already lacking a bit with roles in just your data set report environment.
So I want to tease on that. Okay. I want to go down. So as you're looking at the Microsoft documentation, you have the viewer role. They basically can't do anything. You can just show up and look at things, right?
Yeah.
What is the missing features between what I see as viewer and contributor that you're saying need to be there? Like what's the missing link that you're saying you need in that space?
You need someone to be able to publish to the workspace, but they won't be able to share or deploy content. In my view, I need someone who, yeah, you can publish content to the workspace, but that does not mean it gets to the app. It doesn't get to the actual sharing to consumers yet.
Okay, so that's the difference between member and contributor. A contributor cannot publish to an app, but a member can.
Right.
So you just described a feature that already exists.
Yes. Okay.
So I'll go back to my question again. From the difference between viewer and contributor, what's the gap that's missing there? Now, this is in the current world. Let's thinking only about current Power BI. Like I think there's a smaller gap. So the reason I'm asking this question is I think there's a very small gap, if not at all, between viewer and contributor in the context of a current Power BI workspace.
Right.
Where I think things get more interesting is when you start adding Fabric. But I'll go back to my question again. What is the missing feature between viewer and contributor still? I still don't think I see it.
You obviously have something in mind, but if I'm going to read your brain, okay.
No, I don't have anything in mind. I'm just trying to understand like what you think is. So I don't think there's a gap right now.
Yeah, it's not contributor viewer. You said it's member contributor where I think the biggest gaps are.
No, I don't think those are gaps. I think the gap is for me, right? I think the idea is what's confusing here is for me, or at least particularly for users, right? When you think about a workspace, everyone assumes if I'm going to touch or read or edit it or data set, that those permissions to the data set, because I'm potentially going to build reports or whatever, link to analyze in Excel, the data set permissions are independent of the workspace permissions. So there's like another layer here. So if I had to add another role in this list, it would be data set. Like, what can you do with the data set? So the reason this is confusing is because the data set is the permissions there are independent of that workspace. So the workspace is only about the things you can see in PowerBI.com. Then you have this whole nother layer of, can I even see the data set or work with the data set independently of all that? That's what I'm getting hung up on, because I feel like this is going to be now the same thing for like lake houses when we start adding other data sources of information.
Yeah. It was manageable though in our current world of data sets reports. Like it was maybe a little frustrating, but it was manageable. Like we could deal with it. I don't think it caused too many significant issues. But I agree with you, Mike. We're moving over to now a whole different type of environment where it's almost scarce or hard to call them just a normal workspace.
Yeah. Again, so let's keep going down this route. So any other points that you wanted to make? So let's talk about the existing environment, right?
Yeah.
So another layer of permissions is maybe I want to give people access to the reports, but they can't edit them. Or I want to have a collection of reports and I want to give them out. So that is the app side. So the app side is basically, it's a duplication of the reports. The data set still stays the same.
Right.
The app is now independently copying those reports. And essentially what's happening, again, in my mental model here, the reports are being copied from the workspace, landed somewhere else in PowerBI.com. And so as you change your report, the thin reports, if you change your thin reports in the workspace, those can be different from what's in the app. They're not the same thing. They're literally physically two different objects.
That is my favorite. Yeah. Good.
If you go look at the usage metrics, you'll see there is the report name or the report thing, and there's another report with the word app at the end because it's the same report, but not the same report. It's linked, but it's not. It could technically be versioned differently.
You do remind me of my favorite thing to train. Yeah.
What was that, Seth?
It's a version. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a version of what but there's no indicator. You don't know in the usage metrics. Like you just know that it's linked based on the ID.
And you don't know what's published either. This is my favorite thing to train. It's like, oh yeah, if you publish a report and if you don't update the app, not updated.
Correct.
Update the data set, updated. Yes. Favorite thing to teach people.
Now what's trippy is when the app already exists and you've already shared it and you're adding a new report to it, it's kind of a weird experience to me where you have to update the app, and then add it, but then you have to unhide it. Like the action of adding it wasn't enough to just default show, not default hide.
Yes,
because I actually got tripped up a couple times. Like this,
I think I already published this.
I was doing it. Yeah. Where I'm like, I'm like chastising somebody on my team. I'm like, oh, you just didn't update the app. Updated the app. No, you should see it. And the guy's like, I don't see it. One of the other guys are like, no. go to the other tab now and unhide it. Unhide the thing you just added. I was
Your
like,
app
okay.
audiences.
Yeah, I forgot
Yeah.
about that. It's weird.
Well, so Mike, now that we're dealing though without from the app point of view, which again, one of my favorite things to try to teach people exactly where you have the app audiences. You're like, oh, I didn't hide on all my audiences because it's hidden by default sometimes. We're dealing with Fabric now and the roles. If you look at the documentation, I don't know if we shared it yet, but the roles in Fabric still have the 4 main roles: admin, member, contributor, and viewer. I have some major problems here. I'll just kind of walk through what the normal permissions are. An admin, and this is now Fabric in the world of Fabric, an admin can update and delete a workspace and add or remove other people, including admins, and do everything else in a Fabric workspace: Spark, notebooks, lakehouses. A member cannot add other admins and cannot delete the workspace, but can do everything else in a workspace. A contributor cannot share other items and cannot add other people, but can do everything else in a Fabric workspace.
Hmm.
So you have 3 roles that can literally do everything else: delete, update, publish, create any type of Fabric artifact. That there's no distinction between what they can create, update, or modify. And all the artifacts: engineering, factory, data science. And then there's viewer.
Well, so let's talk about what Fabric's adding here, right?
Yeah.
So Fabric is not adding a front end side to Power BI.
No.
Fabric is adding a lot of back end pieces. So to your point, Tommy, you're exactly right. A contributor can edit, create, delete all of the artifacts that are inside your workspace. So the lake houses, the pipelines, the data flows, but all to me, those are all things that happen before the data set. So if we think about the artifacts that we had in Power BI previously, we had at the very beginning, we had just a data set and just a report. And so we were trying to manage, how do we get the data set or the data engineering portion separate from the reporting side? So to solve that, our initial solution was put the data sets in their own workspace, then make a different workspace where the report thinly connects to it. I can control permissions down to the data set level, again, because that doesn't have to be linked to the workspace itself. All we're doing now with Fabric is we're adding just a whole bunch more items that are all back-end processes. These are all data engineering tools. So I don't see the gap between I'd want a contributor to do any of that stuff. If you're in the workspace, you're building all the things. Here's where I think things are going to go now. Previously, when you were building a data set, the reason you wanted to keep control away from the data set is because the data set is being modeled or created by your basically your data modeler, right? So there's someone who's doing the modeling of the data in that cube. Anyone who can't edit that should not be a part of that workspace. So that's why you're moving that away. What I see happening now with Fabric is there's now another layer deeper than the model, potentially. If your data modeler personality or persona is different than your data engineer, well, now you need 2 workspaces. So now you need a workspace for lake houses, pipelines, anything that comes out of that raw, enterprise lake type, EDW.
Why do you need multiple workspaces?
So if your data engineer is separate than the data modeler, and then you don't want the data modeler to go back and start mucking with pipelines, Fabric notebooks, or whatever you like. So if you need physical separation between those roles, and you have people that only are supposed to touch the data and engineering of the data, essentially making lake houses, and you have different people that are managing a data set, then you need another layer of workspaces. So you'd have a workspace for lake houses, you'd have a workspace for data sets, and you'd have a workspace for reports.
Because of the current infrastructure, because of the current roles,
because of the permissions. The permissions don't give. You can't say.
Right.
But I don't think Microsoft would ever do this. I don't think they're going to add contributor for data sets, contributor for pipelines, contributor for lake houses, all in the same context of the same workspace. That there's going to be too many roles, and it'll just be overwhelming.
It doesn't need to be that granular. I agree. You don't want, if Mike's working on a lake house, he doesn't want Tom to go, what does this do? Click on something. He wants that separation. But I disagree that Microsoft wouldn't go that far, because they kind of already do with scorecards and with apps, in terms of the granular, how detailed you can get with sharing certain artifacts. And that's on scorecards. I can share or create audiences for individual scorecards, and I can create a group of people that are going to see individual metrics in a scorecard. In apps, I have the app audiences. I'm not saying per lakehouse, but I am saying from a contributor level role, there is the data engineering side. People working in lakehouses, people working in notebooks. There's the data science side, where it's going to be obviously the machine learning and certain types of notebooks. There's the data factory side, data flows, and pipelines. Why couldn't these be separated within a workspace rather me having to create? I literally wrote down as you're talking, how many workspaces do I need to create then because of the role permissions now?
Yes. That's my beef, my design. So this is what I'm saying when I'm talking to this a lot with people now and saying,
Right.
Your governance and your design of the system just got a whole lot harder because now you have to think about, what does the data engineer and data science do? What does my data modeling team do? And what does my report development team? Now, in smaller organizations, no problem. You can probably get away with, in smaller organizations, you could throw everything in one workspace and only publish via an app. That's probably fine because the number of people that need segmentation, you don't have a clear person that's only focusing on building reports, because that person is doing the data engineering. That person's loading up the lake with data. That person's building your data model, and they're building the reports. So I see a lot of the times in smaller organizations, it's totally fine to have just one workspace, because when you add permissions to that contributor level, it ticks all the boxes. And then the only way you share things is via the app, because then you can give report consumers, or people who are not allowed to edit things, access to the data set and or the reports as they need. I feel like you guys are suspect of me on this one.
No, I'm not, and I get like what you're saying and why, to some degree. But I guess the challenge question is why. Like, for instance, you have a data modeler and a data engineer, and you're saying, I don't want that person to have access to my data set. Why?
Say that again?
So
why?
Like
what is your, just because something lives in the same workspace, if you have an individual that shouldn't be touching the raw data set and you're just modeling on top of it, that's a kind of, are you trying to control things that shouldn't happen versus like teams having access to things that they don't manipulate anyway?
It's the argument between process and technology, I think, at this point.
Right? The reason I ask this question is there's nothing stopping anyone who has access to any of these workspaces to create and do whatever they would want anyway.
Totally.
Yeah.
But that's where this is where the monitoring solution comes in and makes a lot of sense now. So company comes in and says, we're going to set up a policy that's going to do this. The policy of the company is, I'm, again, looking at the world today, our policy is there's going to be a team of people doing the data modeling independently of the team that's doing the report building. Right. So we're going to have two workspaces. So that's a company policy. And what you're doing is you're using the workspace control mechanism, the technology portion, to influence what's the right permissions for those teams of people. Because we know the skill set of the report builders is similar but different than what you would have at the skill set that does data modeling.
The thing that blows my mind and doesn't make sense to me is this container of a workspace across everything without the ability to just toggle some of these services on or off for people. Like, I want a contributor that does not have Lakehouse access.
Right.
But they can do everything else. To your point, right? Like, I'm a modeler.
Yes.
Like, just get rid of the hardcore engineering part because they don't need to care about it.
Correct.
Make them a like make
You're
them
trying
a
to
viewer
simplify it
in that realm and a contributor everywhere else.
But
instead you're forcing me to create workspaces, like completely different containers where it's not going to stop them from doing stuff anyway. But I get on an enterprise level, like, you're going to be pulling from all your data sources anyway. But it's just, I agree with Mike. What I don't agree with, Mike, is exploding all of this just because I don't have more granular permissions around the services within this ecosystem. Now, for everybody else, there's this fantastic, and this is why I challenge the question, right? Because in many cases, a workspace may contain everything, and all these people are going to be doing all of the activities, and it's not going to be a big deal. But the larger and larger you go in organizations, Mike, to your point,
You're
there are
going to need more
security
delineation
policies.
between this. Yes.
There are absolutely rules about
Yes.
who can have what access to what systems, because it matters. So the fact that we're just broad stroking all of this, unless there's some way in which, like, one security or some other method of applying control on top of it is introduced here, this isn't great. It's not a good thing, and I don't like the fact that we're talking about, like, spooling up independent workspaces just because I don't have the ability to say they shouldn't be able to touch my data model.
But right now, that's the only solution. And excuse me if I get a little sentimental. We haven't had an IT versus business conversation in a long time, and it's really nice. But I think, Mike, I'm gonna have to wholeheartedly disagree with something that you said that stands out. You said, "Oh, well, we have the monitoring solution to take care of that."
No. Monitoring is there. So let me be clear about my statement there.
All right.
The monitoring solution,
right.
Monitoring solution monitors existing behavior, right? We're going to set policies that say no one should be building reports in the dataset workspace. We're going to set policies that say, we are not supposed to be connecting to datasets and such. So the monitoring solution is the ability for you to look and observe, are people following the process, and do you need to adjust your process because of the way people are abusing or sharing things in your work? Like, for example, everyone's sharing stuff through my workspace, and their reports are getting landed there, and they're being directly shared to other people, and you're getting complaints around things not being accessible. That's a policy violation, in my opinion. Sure. You should never share anything with anyone else from my workspace. Everyone would, I think, 100% agree with that one. But you can't know that unless the monitoring solution exists.
I agree.
So my analogy here is, like, you would never drive a car with your eyes closed, and you would never run your Power BI environment without having a monitoring solution in place. It's just not wise. Now, you can do it, but you're going to hit something.
So I agree with the monitoring solution, but in the world of Fabric especially, I don't think it's a solution to say, oh, you have hundreds of workspaces, IT, to manage. Now you have to make sure whether or not someone hits a policy violation. Good luck.
Time out. No, hang on. It's not IT's job to do this. This is the point. The monitoring solution, or these pieces, the whole reason that you have admins, members, and contributors is to give access or delegate access to other teams of people that are responsible. So the center of excellence, which may or may not live in IT, is responsible for this. Their task is to build the monitoring solution, work out the policies the company believes should be right for them, and the COE should also be enforcing them. So when people are violating them, it doesn't have to be an IT function, but then you can say, I see bad behavior on these 4 workspaces, and if there's like 7 admins on those workspaces, who's responsible? Nobody is. So that's why you have to very strategically use who is the admin and who is the contributor in those workspaces. And I would argue there should be 1 admin, maybe 2 for a backup. There should be almost no members, maybe 1, maybe 2 maximum, but everyone should be a contributor. I think you can run most of your Power BI environment on admins and contributors in all your workspaces. And then when there's a problem, the Center of Excellence team has built reporting around what that looks like and can go in and specifically say, here's bad behaviors approaching from these teams, these departments, these workspaces. Let's either change our policy or go educate people to get them to do the behavior that we want. And so I'm not trying to use that as a hammer. It's more of like an observation tool about how your policies work.
It's the velvet hammer.
It's a development hammer.
Well, in theory, I agree, but I think in an enterprise solution, if a team said they only had 4 workspaces out of policy, they would celebrate. They would buy a cake because there's only 4 workspaces. I think the amount, especially introducing Fabric into this to try to manage this monitor, I don't want to. We could put some of this in the parking lot. Well, I just think there's not a lot of automation around here too.
A Power BI admin would be the one that would be controlling all this. The policies would be set by a COE. But yeah, you would basically need a full-time admin.
Yeah.
Is the admin not part of the COE?
Do they have to be?
I think they
it's not a
do.
requirement.
I don't think so. Well,
I think the CUE
it's
needs
neither here nor there, but yeah, I mean,
I think the admin's part of
the
that CUE.
enforcer. He's the enforcer.
Yeah,
The Velvet
or
Hammer
he
enforcer.
or she is the
They.
development hammer.
I think to your analogy, the solution that needs to be there, if I'm going to be driving with my eyes closed, I don't want to have to look back to see what I did. I would like some stop gaps before it happens, because we don't have that right now. Again, a contributor can do everything and creating artifacts. There's no restrictions.
I don't agree with you. I don't agree. Like, I understand you want controls around forward-looking things, but I disagree with that because there's too much to manage. There's too much things. There's too many things that are happening, and
From a manual
Microsoft
point of view, yes.
Microsoft has made Power BI a commodity. Anyone can build a report for next to nothing. You can start using it for almost pennies on the dollar. Like, it's just so cheap to get going. Because the expense to run and use the program is now so low, that means you're going to get a whole bunch of artifacts created, and a lot of them are going to be junk. So to me, this is where the policies or your company needs to think through. You actually need to be focusing on what is certified. Certified becomes much more important because there's going to be a whole pile of self-reporting, and this is what Matthew Roach talks about, right? The pyramid of reporting. There should be a couple key strategic workspaces, certified data sets, and process-based things that say, these are the certified things we care about. And I'm becoming more and more convinced the CUE sets the policies, does education, but really manages that certified elements of context. And we allow a lot of the organization to just do what it has to do at the lower levels. Now, there are some security controls you have to put in place. Like, I'm not going to let you share data externally. There are other things there as well. But I think you need a process. If you don't have a process, you need a process to figure out, how do we find the best content in our organization, and then who is responsible to make it certified and maintain the integrity of the data.
Which is fine. And I'm fine if reports are a commodity. What I don't want to be a commodity are lake houses and Spark notebooks, where, again, a contributor to admin can do the same thing. Do you know why? Because
I'm not
that
sure I agree
begins to
there.
cost a lot of money. That's everything that's now running on the Fabric capacity. If I have a live report,
it's not, yeah, like, but it's not like they're the ones spooling up instantly the cost centers, right? But like, the monitoring part of this becomes extremely important because to your
Yes.
point, Tommy, if anybody can start spooling up those heavier lifting systems on the back end, it is going to chew up your capacity so fast, and you're going to need to figure out and triage, right? Who's breaking production environments, right? Well, and this now speaks to the fact that, like, technically, I would need a out.
You have a
Just
capacity
this,
for
I have to have a capacity for all
production.
my reporting.
Yes.
Right.
And
now I have to have a capacity only for my data sets.
And this makes a lot of sense to me because Fabric goes down in price much lower now, right? So this actually came up in my class recently, talking about capacity planning. So to this point, when you know teams are abusing certain parts of Fabric, this is why you need to have, or at least think through, there probably will be multiple Fabric capacities, and you charge back for that reason. So, hey, you have a finance department that's doing some crazy reporting and, data flows, and it meets their needs. Great. Let them pay for it. So in that situation, your production, I would argue, anything that's going out in certified gets its own dedicated Fabric. It is designed for that, and you let no one else touch that Fabric capacity. So this is why the monitoring is so important, because now you can see who has artifacts on the different capacities, and you can kick people out. You can move the capacities around, and when you find people abusing them, now you can go buy a very cheap or lower end Fabric SKU and give them that and say, here you go. When you run out of capacity, that workspace is now quarantined away from other important workloads that you have. So this is my point. The governance and planning is just exponentially increased with lake houses.
Well, this still, okay.
No, and I agree, but it's also, what it's speaking to a lot to me is the role of a Power BI admin is going to be a much bigger thing than it has in the past.
And I think, to your point too, Seth, everything you just said, Mike, completely agree with. But the admin role and all the other roles, that still doesn't solve anything with the current roles that you would have for Fabric, where, again, we're just splitting up workspaces and having monitoring solutions where the type of role and permissions should solve a lot of this if they were set up the right way.
Yes, but there is like some ideas here too, right? So, again, I'm trying to think of so I'm doing a lot of work with companies right now, thinking about the different layers of security that's occurring inside your organization. When do you have multiple capacities? I think there was a large barrier to entry before Fabric, where you're saying, if I want an enterprise grade premium something, it was like $5,000 a month. That's P1, right? That's what we're talking about.
Right.
So because that was so expensive, it very much limited you to start breaking that capacity down into smaller and smaller increments. And you were saying, well, I don't want to pay $5,000 for this department, but they need something to kind of there's premium features they need to run. So what I see now happening is you can now localize, and this is, I think, genius. MVPs have been saying this forever. Everyone's been saying it's too expensive. $5,000 a month is not the right solution. Now we're seeing we can go all the way down to pricing of $280 per month for all the premium features that you need, which is amazing. So now you can then really dial in the right spend, the right amount of usage for each department. And you can go in, and not every data set should be a billion rows in size. You're not loading hundreds of thousand records in every data set. You shouldn't be. This is where the gravity of those bigger data sets should live on your main capacity. It should live in your main engineering team. And if your data sets start getting really large, you have problems if that is a self-service, user-generated, unmanaged environment, and you're not aware of it as the central IT team or central BI team.
Yeah, Jack Irby asks, can you have multiple capacities under one tenant? And the answer
100%.
But
you can have as many as you need.
It's a cluster, right? It's the engine behind the workspace, right? So for all of these things, if you have a production reporting model, workspace, you would silo that, and that's the conversation here. So you silo that capacity and only have it there for that reason. And all of how do you manage that breakout though, right? Allow other users, what capacity do you need? You just throw a bunch of workspaces on there for data set, engineering tasks, and then that's what people have to use. And then monitor which workspace is hogging all the resources, and then create another capacity for all these other reports.
Exactly right.
And that that's what I'm saying.
Monitoring
the administrative role of this just became a much bigger conversation, because there's a lot of things that are going to be going on in this ecosystem that, Mike, to your point, monitoring, policies, governance, we need to understand how a very simplified version of what we've had in the past, which is the struggle bus point here, right? This was Power BI. These capacities were for models and for reports and report generation. And now all of a sudden it's and this, and this, and this, and this. It's okay, great. But you also just enabled all these users to abuse that, those workhorses.
And therein lies my major problem here. We're talking about roles, and now we've kind of reverse engineered, kind of go, well, we need different capacities, and we need all this monitoring and the trust system to make sure that people are not doing it, because the current roles fail to provide automatic standards for what people can do. Mike, one role.
But I can't articulate your feature though. You ask for that. I don't understand your feature.
Articulate the feature where someone can create a lake house. Some people can control lake houses. Some people can just do data science. Break it out into the categories Microsoft already has: data factory, data engineering, data science,
but that's
activator.
But that's literally why they have the button in the bottom right-hand corner or the bottom left-hand corner.
Anyone can do that if I'm a member or contributor.
That's why you have multiple workspaces. This is turning into a rat's nest of things, right? This is something they're not willing to control. If you want someone to own the work of the lake houses will be centralized, and all the data engineering will be centralized into a workspace. If the data science needs to go read that data, you provide them lakehouse level access, and you give the data scientist a new workspace. They're not in the same.
Until somebody, but here's the thing, right? To Tommy's point, right? This would be very simple if all your data engineering activities are in the lakehouse. That's the thing in the workflow that you care about. What happens when that person decides to do modeling in their workspace?
Thank you.
Now I don't have a workspace just for modeling, right? Now I'm does the data like you could grant permissions in multiple areas, but I'm just saying like it is not as clean as you're separating out just because you're saying, oh yeah, these people will just do those things in this workspace. Like
That's
eventually,
policy based. That's a policy.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's
I don't see why that's a problem.
I get it, but at the same time, like
What is the
I see the difference from the standpoint of permissions to do something
Yep.
versus where work is done. There is a difference.
Okay, I agree with that. But I would also argue too, why not let the Lakehouse developer or the data engineering team, why not let them build a model in there? Now, can anyone consume content from that model? No, right? It may be faster for me to bring things to the Lakehouse and use so by default, by creating a Lakehouse, you will get a default data set already. So as a data engineer, I would like to load data in using the Lakehouse. I would like to have a report. Maybe there's a QA report for me as I'm doing work in that workspace that I'm going to go look at to verify my data looks the way it should look. So I'm not, now the conditions would be is, should anyone else touch that data set? Should anything be published and connected to that data set that doesn't have access? My answer would be no. So you could have the data engineering workspace where people are building the Lakehouse, Power BI data sets, and even quality check reports for themselves inside that workspace. Totally acceptable. However, you will not give other people permission to go use that data or anything else unless you're not going to put their artifacts inside that workspace. So we already, like today, I already have clients now that are doing reporting around data quality checks on real data flows. So if I think about the actions that I would want that data engineering team to do, again, if we're talking about someone who needs to be responsible for when data starts failing, now with Data Activator, why not build a couple dimensions or a couple reporting pieces that actually have, the checks that I need to make sure that every time I'm reloading new data, I don't lose sales numbers in a prior month. I don't lose data there. So that could be an app you publish that is, the Data Lake Quality Report app. And then here's a bunch of reports that live in there, but you're not building like enterprise stuff off of it.
The challenge, a couple things. Enterprise AR says, "God bless America," or God bless Microsoft for building in job protection with complexity.
Yes, exactly.
Which I love. Absolutely.
No,
100% agree.
We're gonna have jobs for years now.
the thing that I'm falling down on though, which I Microsoft just doesn't do a good job anyway, related to the grow up story. What happens when I'm, a small medium sized business and I start creating everything in one workspace?
Yep.
And now we build policies. What am I supposed to like?
Why? But why do they do that? You're right though. You're exactly right.
But how? Am I supposed to now create a new workspace and move all of my stuff into that other workspace?
So here's where certain things are easier to move than others, right?
Okay.
Hold on.
Well, the data set's easy to move. A data set would be easy to move between workspaces because you can just republish things like that. But to your point, Seth, this is why I'm trying to harp on this a lot more, because your scenario assumes that and again, maybe I'm making a bad assumption here. Maybe I'm making a wrong assumption. Your assumption is someone just got in hands on Power BI. They're happily plodding along. They made a bunch of stuff.
And by someone, I mean the vast majority of the companies.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right? They all threw all their stuff into one workspace because they didn't know any better. Right. They didn't go through any training. They didn't read the adoption roadmap. And they didn't hire a consultant who's been doing this for over years.
No. Okay, time out. One,
I gotta agree with Seth
all of those things true, right? Because not all organizations or people that are responsible for these things are going to go hire a consultant, let alone somebody who's already on top of the Fabric preview as deeply as you, right? So what they're going to do is, yes, or a business person is going to do this, or somebody else. But if we're talking in the realm of enterprise, how do you set things up? Even in this, from that standpoint, like somebody said earlier in the comments, their modeling team, their data engineering team, all of it is the same team. They build it in the same workspace.
And I'm gonna have to speak here for Seth as well.
Blows my mind,
Carlo, the current infrastructure.
Hold on. What blows my mind is that this is a talking point for me, because all of the sudden, you know what? Yeah, we built everything in the same workspace, and now the solutions to apply a policy would be inordinate amount of tech debt and time to break things out into a workspace. what the
This is my point, though.
and this goes back to how would you solve this with slightly more granular permissions around what people could do? You know how easy it would be to apply a policy that says, yeah, we're just going to separate this out into groups. It's all the same workspace, but you guys no longer have edit or contributor access to the data engineering lakehouse. We just want you in the modeling area. So now you're two groups. Did we change the workspace? Nah. All we did is put you in two different AD groups.
And Mike, your approach, which it would be right, is assuming that Fabric is rolling out top down with this already in place, with all the planning and consciousness in place.
I would argue Fabric will have to roll down top down. I don't think you're going to get a lot of bottom up from Fabric,
because it is, like you said, a commodity. So you're dealing with these organizations who are like, they're not going to have this planning, they're not going to have the policies in place. I hope they have the monitoring in place, but they may not. So you're still dealing, regardless if it's small or enterprise, you're still now dealing with people who are creating everything in a workspace with no restrictions.
This is awesome.
Your approach is great. However, that is not going to be the way Fabric's rolled out. So how do you compensate for that?
Okay. It's not compensation. It is how people understand what Power BI. So both of you are speaking exactly to my point. You guys are exactly speaking to my points, because people turn on Power BI and they think they know how it works. They think they know how to govern it. They think they know how to do all these things. So what happens is naive businesses are showing up to Power BI and saying, oh, it's just a visualization tool. And they turn it on, not understanding data flows, data lakes, data sets, reporting, apps. No one understands this. Now, when I explain it to them and we say, this is how things could be governed, these are the control surface areas, what happens? Here's the understanding of the way the technology is built. Now, business, make your decision. And as I expose the information about what you can control and what are the options on how to control it, businesses come to their own conclusions and say, oh, yeah, well, the lake houses, we don't want everyone to access them. Okay, well, what is the options we have within Power BI to control those? Now they make new educated decisions about breaking out data sets and reports. The majority of customers I talk to don't read up on this, don't do any homework, don't research it. I would never,
they've been calling me.
You wouldn't go be able to drive a car without taking your driver's ed course.
And
it's the same situation.
The other policy point,
it's just naivete on the business side of things.
Fine. But with Fabric 2, I think you're probably introducing not just the virtual roles in Microsoft, but you're also, according to the policy that you're putting together, the policy that you need, you're also introducing other roles at the organization, right? This is not just the same group.
Don't disagree. You're introducing a bunch of other roles, but when someone in the chat today,
willing to invest in those resources.
Someone in the chat today just said, "Hey, should I learn Power BI?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, I think I need to be a Power BI developer." Literally, Zen was asking about it. I said, "Yeah, you should be," but I said, a Power BI developer is not inclusive enough of a definition of what people can do inside Fabric and Power BI. The roles or the personas that live in Power BI are report consumer, report builder, data modeler, release manager, which no one talks about and is incredibly important, the admin, and now we've just added two more personas, data engineer and data scientist.
Just two.
There's no other new roles. There's not another role other than data science and data engineer they're adding there. These are enterprise things. That is the other items and bringing those in there. So yeah, to my opinion, those pieces of the puzzle are all like this. We have literally pulled a bunch of things that have traditionally done by IT, and we're bringing them now to the business. And the business doesn't think about dev, test, prod. The business doesn't think about all these things. They don't think about enterprise grade anything. And we're just showing up saying, we know what we're doing. We're just going to build a bunch of stuff. This is why we will have jobs for a long period of time. Microsoft is trying to let you deliver value quickly. Totally understand that. But without education or knowledge, if you are an admin and running your Power BI thing, you better go find some place. And I've got a course that does this. So Melissa made a great course, Power BI adoption and governance. It covers everything in the adoption roadmap. That is where you should start. For a minimal price, if you're a leader of Power BI, you should start there, because there are so many things to consider, and it all rolls around your people, your process, and your technology. Once you have that foundation, now we can have conversations around where things go. And because this was so easy to get started, a lot of organizations are going to need to backpedal and figure out what is their policy. And to your point, this is going to happen a lot. There's going to be lots of problems with things being published in the wrong places. You're just going to have to figure it out.
And I think from the governance side of things, like, again, if you have the resources from the onset, which I completely agree with from the policy point of view, from the monitoring, like having that rolled out is great. But I'm going back to Seth's point on the idea that what's the Band-Aid solution or the temporary solution right now that we don't have, where a lot of organizations are not going to have the investment. Again, we don't have a lot of investment already at organizations for the Power BI admin and from the release manager down, where they're not even willing to invest in that type of people. I'm not even saying the technology, just the people. That's probably another conversation we could put on the parking lot, but the people involved in this do drastically change from the governance side. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I agree.
Okay.
I think I would tend to agree with Mike in that, one, the business's priorities are not technology based. Fabric allows us to work very closely with them, but to the point of today's conversation, the fact that the roles are this generic is frustrating, and I hope they fix it, because the solutions that we're talking about aren't solutions. They're hacks to a system that, like, it's great. I don't want to control everything for everyone, but at the same time, like, their business is not going to be interested in building technological solutions for data that last or can be reused or can be built on, etc. That is what BI teams and IT is for. The fact that we're bringing all of these groups together is great, I think, because there are business side people that we want to rely on and include in this process, the data stewards, the owners of the data itself. Like, so it's a mishmash of these two groups together in these workspaces, and that's what I'm most excited about in Fabric. But to not have granular controls for these services and these things makes absolutely no sense to me. You're not turning off the capabilities for people, especially as we rank up in the severity of what could happen in these places. Like, to have to create all of these net new things all the time, and that's how you manage this ecosystem, I think is ridiculous.
To your point, Seth, how many tenant level settings are there right now for Fabric? My son can count to it. 2. Turn Fabric on, turn Fabric off. That's it. So we don't have nearly even the tenant level capacity to manage it. Again, everything's policy based, or please don't do this. Like my 2-year-old's birthday party, like, don't touch the cake yet. That's basically what you're trying to say. The actual technological restrictions are not there yet. We will get there. I'm sure we'll get there, but that has to be part of it from a tenant level settings.
That's an interesting point, Tommy, that you make there. So there is 2 settings. There's one, turn Fabric on, turn Fabric off. The second setting is, can you make Fabric artifacts or not? And
globally,
the latter, or security group, it's globally, but it's a security group that you can enable to do that.
But that's
But here's my argument, though. The education of the members of people in your organization that you're going to light up and turn on, that, again, this is all about policy at this point. There is a flow chart that says someone requests a Fabric workspace or the ability to edit Fabric. I think you should turn off all the ability. You turn on Fabric, but you leave everyone out of the group of people who create Fabric artifacts. Only after an organization has thought about their policy, gone through what it means to them, who can do it, who's going to be responsible for it. Once you have that foundation kind of figured out, you run those people through your training, figure out who those people are. Once they've gone through, now you're able to control it with policy. So now you turn on the Fabric piece. And this is an epiphany that you said, Tommy, that I'm just literally coming to this realization right now. That's a great way to control it.
Yeah.
Because we're even saying, again, with our skills matrix around what skills do you need as a Power BI developer, I don't want to give people build access or making Power BI stuff. You shouldn't have desktop unless you've gone through a minimum of, here's how to build a report, here's how to build a model, here's how to publish things. So my point here is, there are so many things that are now appearing. The leadership needs to really understand there's a lot of stuff coming and you need to plan for it. And now more than ever, it's going to be important to have your COE going to be more important than ever to talk about what you think this needs to be happening with your data, because when this stuff lights up, organizations who don't plan for this are going to get a lot of rat's nests all over the organization of really bundled up weird data that it's going to be. I can literally create a pipeline that takes data from one workspace and lands it in a different lakehouse, in a different workspace. I can move data between workspaces, which is one, amazing, but two, super scary. Because what happens when someone says, we're not using this workspace anymore, and they delete it, and all of a sudden someone else who's relying on data in a different workspace somewhere else totally differently is now has no data.
The policy handle that.
Well, it is a policy. Like that's.
I know what I'm saying. It's a
you
policy
don't do it
after the fact. What I'm saying is after the fact. Are you going to fire that person for deleting the lakehouse?
Create as many workspaces as you want for all the things, so that the only way you can understand what's going on is by using our new tool called Purview.
Yeah. Right. I'm not wrong. but that's Microsoft.
I do like your point on a base level. I do like the point that you called out, which is, turn the business user off from Fabric.
Yes,
but it still doesn't address the roles within those ecosystems.
Not agreeing. Yes, I agree with you. And I think it's just, again, I'm going to go back to, it's about education. I think you can get people to educated. I think you need to get people on the same path. And what has traditionally, up until this point, the business is running many different directions. All I'm saying is we all got to start thinking about how do we run in the same direction, at least on some things.
My last point too is we want people to, again, we do want this commodity base. We do want people to try things out, but there are certain workflows in this same environment that we don't want oopsies. We don't want mistakes, just like accidentally deleting a table, regardless of its policy base.
It'll happen. But how do you recover though? It's going to happen. You just got to plan for it.
But we would like to prevent it in some pipelines and in some workflows more than others.
You just need to go buy Power BI Sentinel and back everything up, and then you're good.
Perfect.
Then you won't lose
and you wouldn't do it. And you wouldn't do it in the first place if you just purchased Mike's training and on all this, and you'd have policies in place.
Right? I'm telling you, it's a good place to start. I mean, it's the minimum dollar investment to get going. It helps.
I didn't mean like let's keep talking about it.
No, I'm just saying it's a good place to start. Anyways, with that, I will say there's a lot of good things coming. I think this is a really great conversation, and this is just a start of many more conversations that are going to go deeper around how do we build that relationship between the business and what is governing, because the tool is doing things that we may not be approving. So we got to figure out how that all works inside our organization. With that, thank you very much for listening to the podcast. This was a heated discussion, one of our more heated ones recently, which I think is pretty good. So hopefully you found some interest from it. Hopefully it definitely turned on some knobs or lit up some ideas in your head around what's going on there. And then we would really recommend, if you like this, please share it with somebody else. That's very helpful for us and to continue to grow the podcast. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Do you have a question, an idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central. Join the conversation on all Power BI Tips social media channels.
Awesome. We thank you all very much. We appreciate your time today. We hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week.